because it doesn't look like that in the list itself. So, you know, there's more than one way to skin a cat. If you can't figure out how to use the set locale function, you can always just simply do it like this. Okay. So, but the point of this, of course, is zip. We're using the built-in native Python native function zip to process two or more lists of related data. And within the for statement, the zip function is used to get the current item from each list. This stores the inventory item in the item variable, and it stores the price item in the price variable. Okay, so the code within the loop has access to both of these variables. Okay, now let's talk more about what it means to be mutable and immutable. Okay, lists are mutable, right? We said this, and that is what enables you to change values. You can insert values, and you can set values with lists because they are mutable. You can't do that with tuples, as we'll see later today. Now, we never really talked about this before, but even what I call the basic data types, some people might call them primitive, but that's really kind of a misstatement. String, integer, float, and Boolean, those are all immutable. Well, you might say, well, wait a minute, Jeff, I can change the value of a string, or I can change the value of an integer. What you're really doing when you, quote, change the value by assigning another variable to it is you obliterate that place in memory where that named variable was originally stored, and you establish a new location in memory with the same name and the new value. So even though it might look to you like, well, I changed the value of the variable, you really didn't. You set up an entirely new one. And I know that might be confusing, but that's the way it was described to me. On the other hand, excuse me. Pardon me. So it took me a while to understand this, but lists are mutable. So you can change the data in the list. You can append an item, for example, to the list, and it directly changes the list object. Now, what about immutable arguments? Okay. Previously, we looked at how to pass a number or a string or Boolean arguments to a function. Now we're going to look at more about how this works and what the difference is when you pass a list to a function. Okay, so again, Python uses objects to store data of all data types, including strings, integers, floating point numbers, Boolean values, and lists. When you write code, you often create objects without realizing it. For example, when you create a literal value of staff, you're using a string type to create a string object for that value. And when you code a literal value of 1, you are using an int type, the digit 1, you're using an int type to create an int object for that value. And so let's see, what are we doing up here? We are defining this function using def double the number. And it's pretty obvious what this does. You enter in a value, and it just simply squares it. Multiplies it by 2, creates this local variable and returns the value of the local variable, which simply will be twice whatever number you pass into the argument. So what does it show? Okay, well, it's a simple function, but it's showing us what we can do with immutable arguments. So whether it's immutable or not, we can still create new values. Okay, so let's see, I have this. This should be slide 21. And again, these are kind of subtle points. And you might think, well, so what? And I wouldn't argue with you. But you should be aware of it. Okay, so this says calling code in the main function. Well, we really don't have any main function. Okay, so if we run this, right, or if we call double the number directly, and let's try to trick it and put in a real number, a float, that works just fine. And it simply multiplies it by 2. Okay. Now, so this actually floats, well, certainly integers are immutable, but we can still manipulate them with a function. You can also pass lists to a function. Okay. So we are, this first function just simply calls in the body of the function, it calls the append method and takes 2 arguments, the name of the list and the name of the item that we want to append. And simply adds it to it. And we don't have to return the list object. Here, let's run this. Right, so we're passing a list, which is mutable. We are simply appending the item to the list. And note that the function itself doesn't return the entire list object, but the list object, which is in the global namespace, is changed. Okay, and we can see that because when we run this code and we print we print both the original list and then right here, and then we run the add to list function, which again just simply appends the item to the list but doesn't return the list. It actually appends it to the inventory list that is in the global workspace. Okay, so that's what that does. Okay. Okay, so that brings us up to our first substantive program, the movie list program. And this is relevant to your exercise. We're going to look at a couple of versions of this. Okay, this first one, as we see, enables us to simply list out movies, add movies to the list, delete movies from the list, or exit the program. In the next version of this that we'll see also today, I believe, definitely today, is kind of a 2D version where not only we are adding names of movies, but we're also adding the years that the movies were released. And in order to do that with the 2D one that we'll, here, let's look at this first. Okay, so this is just movie list program. There's movie list and movie list 2D that we'll look at in a bit. Okay, so what's going on here? Well, let's run it first. You can see here's main, and main gets called first, and main calls all these other functions, including display menu, list the movie list, add a movie, delete a movie. Okay, so let's see what this looks like. So we say run. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say, well, show us what the movie list is right now, which is defined in the main function, right? So here's our starting movie list. We've got these 3 movies. So let's say, well, show me that. So we say list. Then we're gonna add a movie. We're gonna add Casablanca, which was a very popular wartime, World War II time movie starring Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman and who's the gentleman? Somebody Raines. Casablanca, so we say Casablanca. And I'm sorry, you've got to say add. Can't even follow my own directions. Add, we're going to add Casablanca. Tells me Casablanca was added. We say, well, show me the list now. And you can see Casablanca is number 4. What else can we do? Well, let's say we change our mind and we don't want Casablanca on the list. So we call the delete command. Note, even though delete is a reserved word, and you can tell because it's orange, we're using that string del, and it works. Okay. So, but it wants to know the number of the movie, not the index, the number, which is 4, and it tells me Casablanca was deleted. I say, well, show me the list now. And sure enough, it's gone. Okay. So this movie list program demonstrates many of the skills that we've been looking at with these list commands. Okay. So how does it work? Well, we want to exit it. Here is the hierarchy chart. Everything gets called out of main, and there, in addition to main, there are 4 other functions. Okay, which include displaying the menu, which include listing the movies, which include adding a movie, which include deleting a movie. Note that these are not the names of the functions of each function. Okay, the names of the functions, as we'll see, are different than this, are abbreviated. Okay, so that's the hierarchy chart. Let's take a look at it in the code itself. And I guess we could start with main. Okay, so main establishes the initial list, which has these 3 movies. Then it calls the display menu function. And all the display menu function does is it prints out all of the instructions. And then returns to main. And depending on what the person entered, if they entered list, which was one of the valid commands, it would call the list function. And it passes to the list function the current movie list, which is established up here. If they if they type in add at the prompt, it calls the add function, and it passes the movie list to the add function. If they enter the string del, which is a reserved word, but nevertheless works, it calls the delete function. These are the actual names of the functions above, passing in the argument movie list. On the other hand, if they enter exit, it uses the break command to fall out of this while loop altogether and in the program, printing by. If they don't enter a valid command, which is list, add, delete, or exit, it triggers the else clause, which just tells the user it's not a valid command, please try again, and takes us back up to the top of this while loop.